Welcome to Work Life by Design. I'm your host, Mel Marsden. If the last few years have taught us anything, it's that change is inevitable and we no longer need to go to work to work. As a workplace dynamic strategist and the founder of Community, I draw back the curtains on my own business, the clients and projects that we deliver, along with tapping into the knowledge and insights from academics, business leaders and champions of change. I believe that our environments have the power to positively influence our behaviour and performance, inspiring our human potential. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Work Life by Design. Now today I wanted to give a bit of a wrap up on the book launch. So over the last few weeks, I have been launching my book, The Next Workplace, Designing Dynamic Environments that Inspire Human Potential. And to do this, we have hosted events in Brisbane, in Melbourne and in Sydney. And each of those events has been a wonderful opportunity to really shine a light on some of the amazing work that a number of people are already doing in their fields. And these fields are really adjacent to my own industry of workplace strategy and design. Now, with these events, rather than taking the opportunity to sort of sit up there and talk about why I wrote my book and how I wrote my book and talking about all the stories that it contains, I really wanted to start a more impactful conversation of what more we could actually be doing to elevate our experience of work. And I thought that the best way to do that was to hear from those who are actually doing it, who are already exploring those edges and really navigating that new frontier in a very bold way. Now, if you are interested in hearing how and why I wrote the book, you can, of course, go back and hear that as well. I recorded an episode with the lovely Michelle Broadbent back in episode 103. It's called I Wrote a Book, and she interviews me there about everything that's in the book, how I wrote it, why I wrote it, so you can listen in to that episode there. Now, I learned a few things through launching this book, and that was firstly that it always takes much longer to plan an event than you ever expected. So if you are planning on writing a book or hosting an event or launching a book, I highly recommend get organised. It was a mammoth task to plan out all of the activities, and particularly not just one event, having 3 events across the 3 states, but there's a lot of duplication that came from that as well. So we were able to sort of copy paste the methodology, but we still had to sort out venues, catering, drinks, panellists, all of the event hire materials. So there's a lot of work that goes into creating these events, but it was absolutely 100% worth it. The ability to connect with new people, to see people I haven't seen in real life, be able to hug and squeeze some people and see more than just their heads on a screen. That was pretty impressive and pretty exciting for me to be able to do that. So it was absolutely something that I would do again in a heartbeat, and the ability to connect with new people and share those stories and really be able to hear from those who are, as I said, navigating that new frontier, because there are people out there who are creating amazing workplaces that are leading the charge in what it takes to actually run and operate a business that really puts people at the center. We've heard so much hype in the media about organizations that are mandating people to come back, and they're being very dictatorial in terms of how they're approaching their people and the Great Resignation and everything that then has sort of spun off that. But there are people out there who are doing amazing things. And so I really wanted to bring those conversations to life through this event, and I really feel like we did that. So I'm pretty happy with how it all turned out. And what I saw start to emerge from these conversations were that, whilst I brought the questions to the table, and they were similar across the 3 locations due to the current topical conversations and the current climate of work, what did shine through was that the panellists obviously brought their own unique thoughts and perspectives to each of those conversations. And what I saw start to emerge from that was really 3 key themes, and within them a few really key ideas that I would like to revisit and reinforce in today's episode as a bit of a wrap up of what we heard. And what I'm also going to do is that at the end of each of these 3 key themes, I'm going to leave you with a question. Something that you can ponder in terms of how this is actually already showing up in your workplace and what your opportunity is to actually elevate that within your own workplace. So the first key theme that I started to see emerging was really about the fact that we need to be redesigning work and the employee experience. Now, what this is all about is really understanding the shifting needs of the business and the organization's future strategic vision. Now, the reason that we need to start here is because the landscape has changed immensely. Like what was happening pre pandemic and the way we were working and the visions that we had for organizations and our operating models were very different to how they are now. And so I think we actually need to go back and we need to start to think about, first and foremost, what does work look like in our organization? Because when we understand that, we can then start to think about, well, what's that going to be from a strategic vision for us in the future? Where are we going as a business? What are we trying to achieve? And how do these two things need to come together? Because one thing that I know from all of these conversations is that we can't operate in a bubble. We can't build a workplace and expect people to come to it. But conversely, we can't also just let our people run free range and never have people coming together. There needs to be a give and take, and there needs to be a very intricate balance. And this is where we start to see that. We start to understand the needs of the business and our future strategic vision. And then how can we pull that together? And then we need to start to look at, well, what does that actually mean from a workplace perspective? Now, historically, our workplaces have been a very financially driven decision because they are a liability or they have been viewed as a liability. But what we are starting to see now is that we need to sort of flip this on its head. We need to start thinking about our workplaces as a business and a people decision, because that is what we're talking about here. We are talking about how we are going to elevate our employee experience, but also how we're going to deliver on our strategic vision for our organization. And so we need to take the lens off it being purely a financial decision, but start to look at it from that business and people decision. A couple of other things that started to fall out of this and how we can actually deliver on this redesigning of work and ensuring that we're really elevating that employee experience. The first thing was around surprising and delighting our employees and really about enhancing that experience of coming into the office. What is the value that it's going to add to me? What is going to delight your people so that they are going to want to come in? And, one of the conversations that happened here in Brisbane was that Jess from Entain said that no matter what you do as an employer, what you do will become an expectation in a matter of moments. So at Entain, they really focus on the idea of surprising and delighting their employees. Now, conversely, Kate Hill from APA shared an alternative perspective and said, we don't surprise and delight our staff. They're engineers. We can't surprise them. Like, it's not a good thing for them. So, the way that you then do this for, an APA infrastructure engineer versus an Entain IT programmer is that at APA, they surprised and delighted them by giving them a 4-burner barbecue versus the Entain employees who are getting events sprung on them, drinks, pool tables, different experiences that really started to surprise and delight, but do it in a way that is meaningful and it is that surprise so that it doesn't become that expectation of something that we're entitled to. The other thing that came up quite a bit was around listening and acting. And so this is about engaging with your people, understanding what it is that they want, actually hearing their perspective, going, this is what we think we understand. Is this correct? Have we got this right? And then not just putting that in the bottom drawer and forgetting about it, but actually acting on that feedback. And that feedback could be looking at what are the individual needs of your people? How do they need to work? What's going to best support them? But then what it also comes down to, and I'm seeing this more broadly out in the work that I'm doing with the different organizations at the moment, is that it's about writing those rhythms. Now, one of the books that I particularly love and have used a lot in my own organization is Scaling Up, the Gazelle's book by Vern Harnish. And a lot of what comes down in here is about understanding the rhythms. What are we doing? When are we meeting? How are we meeting? What do we do on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a fortnightly, monthly, quarterly, annually? What do those rhythms look like? But also then what are the agendas for those meetings? What are the activities that we're going to be doing with that so that when we're coming into the workplace, we understand the purpose of that interaction. We understand the value it's going to give me. We have a structure around how we know it's going to work and we can predict this. And a lot of employees do like predictability. I kind of like a little bit of chaos, but a lot of employees want to see that rhythm coming through. And so understanding what that needs to look like and then communicating that more broadly, that's when we can start to write those rhythms. Now, the final point that I want to make under this idea of redesigning work and the employee experience is really understanding the impact that our workplaces, the physical environment, the interactions that happen within them, the impact that has on your people. Now, Brad, who is the CEO of Hub Australia, he actually shared a really poignant kind of point here. And what he said is that 80% of his employees' jobs are done by the time you've been greeted at the welcome desk and you've got your coffee, because those couple of very momentary interactions have set the tone for your entire day. You've come into the workplace, you've got that music, you've got the smell of the coffee, you've got someone who's greeted you at the reception desk, you've got your coffee in your hand. That very short momentary experience has set the tone for your entire day. Now, what the impact of that is, obviously your performance is going to be better because you're going to be in a better mood, or if it's been a bad interaction, a bad mood. But what is the ripple effect of that on that day's performance? How are you feeling about the work that you're doing? Because when we are feeling really good about the work that we're doing, that's then rippling out into our community. We're taking that experience home. We're going home a happier person, which is then going to impact more directly on our family in a positive way, and then more broadly out into our community. So, how are we making our workplaces and the experiences that we have in them positive ones so that they are having that ripple effect? And underpinning all of that is really what I keep harping on about, is around purpose. How do we connect our employees to that feeling that they're part of something bigger? How are we giving them that line of sight that starts to make them feel like what they're doing is contributing back into the world in a meaningful way? So, the question that I want to leave you with for this key theme is, what does work look like in your organization, and how can you create a workplace that really enables that work? So, thinking really deeply about what is the work that we need to be doing, how do we need to be doing it, and then what can our workplace do to actually enable that work to occur more productively, more efficiently, more socially, whatever it is that is going to be underpinning that and enabling that work to happen. What can your workplace do to support it? Enjoying the episode? I would love it if you would share this show with just one person who you think it would inspire. Just one. The more we can share the insights of what it takes to make work work, the closer we are to elevating everyone's experience of work. Now, the next theme that was coming out was really around flexibility and hybrid work. Now, this is a hot topic at the moment, with many organisations trying to navigate what hybrid work looks like and how to embrace flexibility in their workplace. And across every single conversation and every single event, what it came back to is that we cannot boil this down to simply a work from home or a work from office conversation. That is not what flexibility is. That is not what hybrid work is about. Hybrid work means that we need to start actually taking a broader lens at this and not just be talking about when and where we work, but on how and what we work on. And Sophie from the Serenity Collective articulated this beautifully in our Sydney conversation when she said we need to start thinking about what we're doing and how we're doing it, but in the context of a team. How can we job craft our work in the context of our team, and how do we all play to our strengths? And she gave a great example. If you're in a team and you're really great at writing, but you're not great at speaking, and someone else is great at speaking and they're not great at writing, why don't you take the writing tasks and they take the speaking tasks? Think about what are the components and the activities that are required in work, and then how can we divvy this up to actually start to play to our strengths and then enable us to work more consistently to what is going to work for us and enable that true flexibility. Now, the other big part of this conversation is around how do we make work flexible? And of course, there's been the whole trials around the 4-day work week, and then talking about that in terms of what is true flexibility. And again, the resounding comments that came through were around not one size fits all, and no one size can fit all. Now, this was an interesting conversation because what it starts to do is it opens up the conversation more broadly around white collar workers to those who are very much on the front line. Now, 70% of our workforce in Australia is on the front line. Only 30% of people are office-based white collar workers. So when we're talking about 4-day work weeks and flexibility and the ability to work from home, we're actually only talking about a very small minority of our whole population. But in the context of what I do in designing workplaces, it is a very big focus. Now, having said that, I'm starting to work with more and more organizations who have that frontline workforce, and it's about what can we do to enable flexibility across the entire workforce. And what happens here is that you can no longer talk about what is equal. I can't give everybody in that organization the same equal access to flexibility. But what we need to start talking about is what is equity. What can we do for the different roles to embrace flexibility? And some of the conversation that came through was around flex time, And that happens based on project schedules and the seasonality of those. So if we're having really busy peak periods, we're on for those 5 days and possibly even more just because of the workload that's happening. But conversely, when those are in those shallow periods and we're on our off peak periods, can we drop back to 4 days or less? And then our rhythm of our work is fluctuating across the course of the year due to those project schedules. Another one that came out was around school holiday leave. Many of us are working parents. How can we support them by helping them with reduced work hours? They still want to work. They're probably going to be at home with their kids, but they also want to be able to spend some time with their kids, take them to do some activities. So another idea that came out was around having a 50% reduction in hours for school holiday leave. So taking 50% annual leave and then 50% working in a remote capacity. Other things are about the ability for your staff to go surfing in the mornings, call work hours, looking at shift work, and then even the embracing of meeting-free days. And if you listen to the Brisbane episode, Jess from Entain shares how they have introduced the 9-day fortnight and the meeting-free Wednesdays to support that cognitive function of their people. But also then conversely, you also hear Rob Zendel from Hall Chadwick talking about how as a professional services firm that bills by the hour, effectively working a 4-day work week reduces their revenue and reduces their employees' capacity to earn. There's implications of this that are different in each organization, each sector, and it's understanding those nuances in your business and then being able to find something that works for your people and for your business, because this has to be a give and take. It can't be, I just want to have the flexibility and I can do what I like, because we're losing that interaction of coming into the office with that. We need anchor days. We need to writing these rhythms with our people so that we are also serving the business needs, but we're also supporting and accommodating those individual needs where we can. So the question I want to leave you with for this particular theme is, what does flexibility look like for all of your team? And coming back to the idea of what is equality versus equity. And when we're talking about this, the example coming back to the hub was the office worker can work remotely, but the barista can't because he can't make your coffee or she can't make your coffee from home. So, what is the impact of that flexibility across your entire workforce? And, if you are purely just a office-based workforce, then that's going to be much easier than if you are a mix of frontline and office space. But then the next question for this, there's two questions for this one. What is the best way for my organization to then accommodate that physically? Now, this comes back to the idea that the metric of one desk for every employee is no longer a feasible metric for many organizations, given the flexibility that we are giving our people to choose where and how they're working. So understanding what that flexibility looks like and what flexibility you want to offer then can start to inform the accommodation in your workplace. But that also extends beyond just desks and people. It's thinking about, what does collaboration look like? What kind of collaboration spaces do I need? It's thinking about, what kind of quiet spaces do I need? What are the ratios those? How are people going to use them? So there's a lot to think about in that one, but it all starts back again with our first theme, which is about understanding and redesigning what work actually looks like in your organization. Now, the third theme that came out was really around inclusivity and belonging. Now, this was a question I did ask across each of the panel conversations, but again, there was some resounding responses that came out of this. And the first one was really about understanding your workforce and what do they need. Now, this is about actually understanding, considering the needs of each employee, but also thinking ahead. Not just thinking about who your workforce is here and now, but also thinking about who might be here in the future. What kind of accessibility do we need to be taking care of? What kind of cultural sensitivities and personal work practices and work sensitivities do we need to be considering within our workforce? What are some of the cultural beliefs that our people might have as they join our workforce? And how does family play into all of this? Because there are going to be different structures of what family looks like for each and every individual. And again, one of the conversations that we had was Brad and Sydney suggested, they're actually looking at puppy leave for those who are not planning on having children. They've also talked about taking different public holidays for their employees to actually reflect different personal and cultural beliefs. So we have some structures within our workplaces, but sometimes we can get a little bit rigid in what they look like. And this is our opportunity to think a bit more broadly about who is in our workforce, who may be in our workforce, and what do we need to do to start to cater for them. Now, the other key point that came out of this conversation was around connection. And connection is really about what is our connection to our business, but also connection to each other. What is those relationships that we are building with our peers, with our colleagues, with our leaders? How are we starting to support that? Now, the Serenity Collective have done a great big piece of research this year with the Oranges Toolkit. And what they found from that was that vulnerability is going to be a key point in those conversations. How do we have open and honest conversations and actually start to appreciate everyone as they are as a human? And this was a really interesting conversation around that because vulnerability takes a lot of courage. And if I've got some Brené Brown fans listening in, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about, is because vulnerability requires you to put yourself on the line. It requires you to start and open up in order to start those open and honest conversations. And so that is a leadership capability that we need to start having as well, because our leaders don't necessarily have that capability to be able to support that. And that's where we need mental health literacy, and we need the ability to have those intelligent conversations. Now, connection is also really important because, as Sophie also pointed out, there was a study that followed a group of people for 75 years. And what they found from that study, that a precursor to a life of health and happiness actually relies on good relationships. So, having a good sense and strong connection to our peers and our colleagues is going to be good for our own individual health, but it's also actually really good for our organization's health, because Better Up did a study in 2022. And what they found was that those organizations who had strong senses of connection also had a 56% increase in performance. They had a 50% decrease in turnover, and they had a 70% decrease in absenteeism. So, connection, the ability for us to connect, building those good relationships is actually imperative to our own personal health and well-being, but it's also great for our organizations. And so that is where, when we are able to actually connect, we are seeing each other as humans, and that is where the crux of inclusivity and belonging comes from. So, the question that I want to leave you with for this particular theme is, how can my workplace communicate that sense of connection? How do we communicate inclusivity and belonging? How can we use our workplace to be the unifying story that communicates who we are and what's important to us? And this comes back to that idea that I subscribe to very heavily, is that our workplaces should be a reflection of us as an organization. What is our brand personality? What is the experience that we want people to have when they're coming in to work with us? And your workplace has the ability to communicate that instantly through those sensory connections when someone walks in there. What are they seeing? What are they hearing? What are they smelling? What can they touch? And essentially, how are they feeling? So, they're the three key themes that I saw emerging from our conversation. First one was about redesigning work and actually understanding the employee experience that you want your people to have. Really diving into what flexibility work looks like and how does hybrid work actually work. It not being about working from home or working from the office. It's not about the 4-day week. It's what does flexibility really, truly actually look like. And the final one was around inclusivity and belonging, which really boils down to that sense of connection and that building of relationships between peers and colleagues. So that's it. That is the final wrap on the book launch tour. It has been a fabulous experience. If you haven't had the opportunity to listen into each of those episodes in detail, I highly recommend going back and doing that. There are great conversations. There's 6 episodes there for you to listen to. And if you haven't grabbed a copy of the book yet, please do. I have poured my heart and soul into this for the last 4 years, creating this book. And I think it is a really timely that it is now out in the world, because it is such a conversation that we are having. The book is all about connecting those modern day management practices and principles to the physical structures of their environment. I've really written it for the people and culture leaders to actually understand those objectives that they have, how to bring those workplace strategies, how to build those experiences, and what does the workplace do to actually enable that? How can you change the structure, the physical design, the way that people interact, the way that they communicate? All of those touch points within your physical environment influence your ability to actually deliver on those objectives. So That's what the book's there for. It's a bit of a playbook. It's to help guide your understanding, to help you inspire your thinking, to help you start conversations. And particularly, how can you start to guide your organization in a way that starts to see your workplace as an asset and something that is not a liability on the balance sheet, because you can see dramatic returns on investment from your workplace when it is done well. So thank you to everyone for joining me. For those who are able to come and join us at each of the book launches, thank you so much for joining me. I would love to thank our venue sponsors again. So Hall Chadwick in Brisbane, Stylecraft in Melbourne, and the Hub Australia in Sydney. They were fantastic events. I loved every minute of it. I loved being able to connect with everyone who was able to come. And I hope that by tuning into these conversations, you've been able to take a bit of a glimpse away of what they're all about, but also be inspired by those conversations to be able to take that back and inspire a different way of working in your own work environment. So thanks very much for tuning in with me again today, and I look forward to chatting with you again next week.